My mother looked me straight in the eye over dinner and casually slid a $15,000 venue invoice across the table, saying, "You're paying for your sister's wedding. Family sacrifices for family." When I flat out refused, she just smiled. Waited until I stepped into the bathroom, reached into my purse, stole my emergency credit card, and tried to wipe out my savings that very night. But instead of breaking down, I honestly couldn't stop laughing. Why? Because my mother had absolutely no clue who that card really belonged to, or the legal nightmare she'd just walked herself into. The very next morning, my phone rang. It was my sister, sobbing and completely freaking out. Stick with me until the end to see how one greedy decision exposed a family secret nobody saw coming. And while you're here, drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to see just how far my story has reached. The funeral flowers were still fresh when my mother decided to set her sights on my hard-earned savings. My name is Violet. I'm 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family lived by one strict, unspoken hierarchy. At the very top sat my 24-year-old sister, Chloe, the golden child who could never do any wrong. At the very bottom was me, the dependable, hardworking older daughter who was expected to quietly clean up every mess everyone else created. When my mother, Brenda, invited me over for a small family dinner on a rainy Tuesday evening, I actually figured she wanted to reconnect. Boy, was I wrong. The second I sat down at her dining room table, she didn't ask how work was going or how I'd been doing. Instead, she calmly slid a thick, glossy document across the table toward me. It was a reservation deposit for an ultra-luxury country club. The total at the bottom was printed in bold red letters. $15,000. Brenda folded her arms, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Chloe's dream wedding is coming up, and this deposit has to be paid by tomorrow morning. You're covering it. Family sacrifices for family, Violet." I stared at the invoice, then looked back at my mother's completely emotionless face. Chloe had been dating her boyfriend for only 6 months before getting engaged. Neither of them had steady jobs, yet somehow they were planning a $60,000 fairy tale wedding like money grew on trees. Brenda expected me to bankroll the entire fantasy just so she could brag to her friends. The sheer nerve of it left me speechless for a moment. But as I kept staring at that $15,000 total, something inside me finally snapped. I slowly took a deep breath, gently placed the invoice back on the polished mahogany table, and looked directly at my mother. "I'm not paying for this, Mom," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. Chloe and her fiancé decided to book a luxury country club on a fast food budget. That's their responsibility, not mine. Brenda's expression instantly twisted with anger. The polite motherly mask disappeared, replaced by the sharp, cutting voice I'd dealt with my entire life. "How can you be so cold?" she snapped, slamming her hand against the table. "You make good money. You don't even have kids. Your sister deserves one magical day, and you're sitting here hoarding your cash out of pure spite. You've always been jealous of Chloe." "This isn't jealousy, Mom. It's common sense," I replied as I pushed my chair back and stood up. "I've worked 80-hour weeks for years to build my financial security. I'm not throwing away $15,000 of my hard-earned money just so Chloe can play princess for 6 hours. Brenda glared at me, her chest rising and falling with every furious breath. "If you walk out that door without paying this deposit, don't even bother coming back. You're destroying your sister's happiness." I gave a small shrug. "Then I guess I'll see myself out," I answered quietly. Before leaving, I excused myself to use the hallway bathroom so I could wash my hands and clear my head. I left my handbag on the entryway table for less than 3 minutes. When I came back, Brenda was standing in the kitchen with her back turned toward me. Unusually quiet. Something felt a little off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I picked up my purse, wished her goodbye one last time, and walked out into the cool, rainy night. What I didn't know was that while I had been in the bathroom, My mother had quietly unzipped my bag and helped herself to what was inside. I got home around 9 o'clock that evening, poured myself a glass of water, and tried to shake off the stress from dinner. Honestly, I figured the drama was finally over. I couldn't have been more wrong. At exactly 1:15 a.m., my phone suddenly started buzzing nonstop on my nightstand. Buzz after buzz ripped through the silence, pulling me awake. Half asleep, I grabbed my phone, expecting some kind of emergency. Instead, my screen was flooded with urgent fraud alerts from my financial institution. Alert: $15,000 transaction attempted at Grandview Country Club events. Status: declined. Flagged for suspected fraud. My heart skipped a beat before confusion quickly took over. How could someone even try charging my account? I jumped out of bed, hurried to the entryway, grabbed my purse, and unzipped the main compartment. I reached into the inside pocket and pulled out my wallet. My debit card was still there. My personal credit cards were exactly where I'd left them. But one slot in the back was completely empty. That's when the real panic hit me. Then, almost instantly, a cold wave of realization washed over me. The missing card wasn't my personal credit card at all. It was a high-level corporate procurement card issued directly by the company I worked for. Because I managed major office equipment purchases for an international corporation, I'd been trusted with a company card carrying a massive credit limit. But there was a catch. Every single transaction required prior approval tied to a specific purchase order number. No exceptions. Brenda had quietly slipped into my purse, spotted the sleek black card, assumed it was my personal credit card, and passed the card details to the country club so she could pay Chloe's wedding deposit. She thought she'd pulled off a clever move. She had no idea what she'd actually done. The moment that $15,000 charge was submitted after business hours on a corporate procurement account, my company's automated security system didn't just decline the payment. It immediately flagged the merchant account, locked my corporate card, and generated an automatic fraud report that was sent straight to our legal department. I sat there on the edge of my bed in the dark, staring at the fraud notification glowing on my phone. I didn't cry. Heck, I actually burst out laughing. My mother had just committed corporate credit card fraud to pay for my sister's wedding. And she didn't have the slightest clue about the legal mess she'd just dumped herself into. The next morning, at exactly 7:30 a.m., my phone rang again. The caller ID showed Chloe. I answered, and before I could even say hello, hysterical sobbing exploded through the speaker. She was breathing so fast she could barely get a sentence out. "Violet, oh my God. Violet, you've got to help me," she cried, her voice shaking with pure panic. "Everything's ruined." I slowly sat up in bed, keeping my voice calm. "Chloe, slow down. What's going on? Why are you freaking out? What happened?" I don't even know," she wailed. "The venue called me about 20 minutes ago. They canceled my wedding date. They canceled everything." I frowned. "Canceled? Why?" She struggled to catch her breath before answering. "The wedding coordinator said somebody tried to pay the $15,000 deposit late last night using a stolen corporate credit card. Their payment system flagged it as corporate fraud." She started crying even harder. "Now the general manager has blacklisted us. They think we're trying to scam them." I stayed completely silent. Chloe took another shaky breath. Mom texted me around midnight saying she had taken care of the deposit. She literally wrote, "The venue is secured. Don't worry about Violet." There was a long pause. Then her voice became small, almost afraid. "Violet. What did Mom do? Where did she get that card?" The pieces finally clicked together inside her head. The realization slammed into her like a truck. "She stole it from your purse, didn't she?" Chloe whispered. Her voice trembled with fear and embarrassment. "She seriously thought she could swipe your card, and you'd have no choice but to pay it back later." She sniffled hard before continuing. "Now the venue says they're preparing to report our family to the police for fraud." My grip tightened around the phone. They gave us 2 hours to explain everything before they file an official report. I leaned back against my pillows, listening as my sister, the family's golden child, completely unraveled on the other end of the line. For the first time in her life, she sounded genuinely terrified. Not because she'd lost her dream venue. Because our mother's greed had created a disaster neither of them could talk their way out of. About 10 minutes after I hung up with Chloe, my phone rang again. This time, Brenda flashed across the screen. I answered. The second I said hello, my mother exploded. Violet, what the heck did you do to my transaction? She screamed at the top of her lungs. The venue coordinator just called me furious, saying the payment was flagged for fraud. You need to call your bank right now, tell them it was just some administrative mistake, and unfreeze those funds immediately. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply took a slow breath. Mom, stop yelling, I said coldly. First of all, you stole something out of my purse while I was in the restroom. She went completely silent. Second, I continued, you didn't steal my personal credit card. Another pause. You stole my company's procurement card. The silence on the other end became almost deafening. After several long seconds, Brenda finally spoke. Company card? She stammered, the confidence in her voice disappearing almost instantly. Yes, I replied calmly. That card belongs to the international company I work for. It's issued strictly for major business equipment purchases. I let the words sink in before continuing. Last night, you attempted to process an unauthorized $15,000 transaction after business hours. The company's automated security system immediately flagged it as suspected corporate credit card fraud. I heard her suck in a sharp breath. The panic in her voice was impossible to miss. Violet, she whispered. You have to fix this. Her tough attitude was gone. Completely gone. Just tell them I had permission, she begged. Tell them you gave me the card. Please. I can't go to jail over this. For a moment, I simply closed my eyes. Growing up, I had spent years cleaning up Brenda's messes, paying bills, covering emergencies, making excuses, bailing everyone out. But not this time. I'm not lying to my company's legal department, I said firmly. I'm not risking my career or my freedom to cover up a crime you chose to commit. She started crying. Real tears. Please, Violet. I interrupted her before she could keep going. You have exactly 2 choices, Mom. My voice stayed calm, almost emotionless. Option 1, you drive to my apartment right now, hand me my corporate card, and personally call the venue manager to admit you tried using a corporate card without my knowledge. I paused just long enough for the message to land. Option 2. I spoke even more slowly. I let my company's legal department move forward with filing a formal police report for felony theft and corporate credit card fraud at exactly 12 o'clock today. Silence. Not even breathing. Then I added one final sentence. Choose wisely. She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She didn't insult me. For the first time in my life, my mother had absolutely nothing to say. Almost 30 minutes later, someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, Brenda stood there looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her face was pale. Her shoulders were slumped. The confidence she'd carried her entire life was nowhere to be found. Without saying a single word, she reached into her purse with trembling hands and handed me my corporate procurement card. I took it, carefully checked that it was mine, and slipped it back into my wallet. Only then did I step aside. Come in, I said. She quietly walked into my apartment, looking around as if she were entering a courthouse instead of her daughter's home. The woman who had always acted like she controlled everyone now looked completely defeated. Brenda quietly sat down at my kitchen table, looking like a completely different person. The woman who had spent years barking orders and manipulating everyone around her now couldn't even look me in the eye. I placed my phone on the table and dialed the venue. When the coordinator answered, I switched the call to speaker. I looked directly at my mother. Go ahead, I said. Tell them exactly what happened. Brenda swallowed hard. Her hands shook so badly she had to grip the edge of the table. For several long seconds, she couldn't get the words out. Finally, with tears streaming down her face, she took a shaky breath. My name is Brenda," she said quietly. "I took my daughter's corporate credit card without her permission." Her voice cracked. "I thought it was her personal card." She closed her eyes for a moment before forcing herself to continue. "I tried to use it to pay my younger daughter's wedding deposit." The venue manager remained silent until she finished. Then he spoke in a calm, professional tone. "Mrs. Brenda, we appreciate your honesty, but because this involved an unauthorized corporate payment method, our security policies require us to permanently deny any future bookings associated with this reservation." Brenda's face drained of what little color she had left. The manager continued. "Your reservation has been canceled permanently. Your family has been placed on our internal blacklist, and this matter has been documented as an attempted fraudulent transaction." There wasn't a single word Brenda could say. The call ended. The apartment fell completely silent. A few hours later, Chloe called me again. This time, there were no screams. No accusations. Just exhaustion. "It's over," she said quietly. "The venue banned us for good." I didn't interrupt. She let out a long, shaky sigh. "I finally know the truth." Another pause. "Mom stole your card because she thought she'd force you to pay after the charge went through." I stayed silent. "I can't believe she actually did that," Chloe whispered. "She almost got all of us into serious legal trouble." For the first time that I could remember, my sister wasn't defending our mother. She wasn't making excuses. She wasn't blaming me. She was finally seeing Brenda for who she really was. Later that afternoon, Chloe went to our mother's house. Their conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. I wasn't there to hear it, but Chloe eventually told me everything. For the first time in her life, she stood up to Brenda. She stripped our mother of every single wedding planning responsibility. No more choosing vendors. No more handling deposits. No more making decisions. No more controlling the guest list. Nothing. Brenda argued. She cried. She begged. She even claimed she was only trying to help. But this time, nobody bought it. Not even Chloe. Without our mother's constant pressure to impress everyone, reality finally set in. A lavish $60,000 country club wedding simply wasn't possible. So Chloe and her fiancé sat down together and made an adult decision. Instead of chasing an over-the-top fairy tale they couldn't afford, they canceled every extravagant plan. They personally apologized to their guests. Then they booked a beautiful ceremony at a local botanical garden that fit comfortably within their actual budget. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't designed to impress strangers. But for the first time, it was real. And somehow it meant even more because of that. On the day of the wedding, Brenda wasn't sitting at the head table giving orders like she'd always imagined. Instead, she quietly took a seat in the back row. She watched the ceremony from a distance, stripped of the control she'd spent decades using over everyone around her. Her constant need to manipulate her daughters had finally blown up in her face. For the first time, she was forced to face the reality that her toxic behavior had cost her every bit of authority she once held over our lives. In the months after the wedding, something unexpected happened. Peace. Real peace. Once firm boundaries were finally in place, the toxic family dynamic that had controlled us for years started falling apart. Without Brenda pulling the strings, everything slowly changed. To my surprise, Chloe and I actually became closer than we'd ever been before. Once she stepped out from under our mother's influence, she matured quickly. She finally realized that financial independence, honesty, and personal responsibility mattered a whole lot more than chasing appearances or trying to impress other people. As for Brenda, life taught her a lesson she should have learned a long time ago. Actions have real consequences. And for real, those consequences don't disappear just because someone says they're family. She finally understood that her daughters were no longer willing to be manipulated, guilt-tripped, or financially exploited for her personal gain. These days, she keeps mostly to herself. She knows that if she ever crosses that line again, she'll lose both of us completely. That boundary isn't a threat. It's a promise. Standing up to my mother wasn't easy. Honestly, it scared the heck out of me at first. But protecting my career, my financial future, and my self-respect turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. Sometimes the hardest choice is also the right one. Now I'm curious about you. If you had been in my shoes, what would have been your move? Would you have given your mother one last chance with an ultimatum? Or would have you let the company's legal department handle everything from the very beginning? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what you'd have done. And before you go, I've got 2 more unbelievable family stories waiting for you on the screen right now. They're packed with shocking twists, emotional moments, and endings you probably won't see coming. Go check them out next. Thanks so much for sticking with me all the way to the end. I'll catch you in the next story.